very warm welcome. Now we have a fabulous topic: reinventing yourself in changing times. We all need change in our lives from time to time to shake things up and approach our life with a refreshed enthusiasm. However, to explore this topic, this fabulous topic, we have with our sister Denise Lawrence, who's joining us from her new home in south of France. So Denise is actually a very powerful yogi who has been a student and teacher with the Brahma Kumaris for over 50 years. What is really special about Denise, I find, is her clarity of thought. She's got a powerful intellect and the deep authenticity and warmth, with which she translates deep spiritual truths into everyday practical life. Denise, it's over to you.
Thank you so much. Well, it's delightful to be with you once again. And so I will be from this place from now on. This seems to be a permanent base, and it's I'm talking about reinventing the self because I'm also reinventing myself by being in a different place, a different country with a different language, and my whole way of, practicing Raj Yoga and working with the Murlis and working with the different people in my network of BK friends and contacts and so on. So spiritual practice has many, many levels to it. And one attribute is that when you develop yourself spiritually, you accumulate spiritual power. And also there's a study. So you study information about karma, about the soul, about the supreme power, about virtues and vices and all this sort of thing, so that you can be the very best you that you can be. And the Murli is a word for the study. And the study is so extraordinary that we do in Raj Yoga that it magically intensifies the quality of your consciousness. It causes you to be able to manage your negative emotions very effectively. And you have the power to choose and succeed in being the very best you that you can be. And so we use this word Murli for this material, and that's what the Murli is. So today we're talking about reinventing the self in difficult times, intense times. And I'm not really talking about individually, I'm talking about collectively, because it seems to me that if I look at the historical record, big changes happen to humanity when big changes happen in our natural environment or political environment. And one of the most drastic things that impacts the human experience is war. And we know anybody who's looking at the news is aware that there are quite a lot of wars going on. And there are lots of films and documentaries and so on, which give us the historical dimension of the First World War and the Second World War. People are very, very interested in that because when there were these huge wars, global wars, it changed society in lots of ways. Now, what's happening at the moment is people are very aware of the war in Ukraine, and we are speaking to you. I'm speaking to you from France. Madhavi is speaking to you from England. So we are in the European continent, and Ukraine is also in the European continent. So this is a war which is much more close to home and much more impacting us than wars happening in the Middle East or wars happening in Africa. And the way the media treats this war and those wars is also different because of that proximity. And there's been a great impact in terms of energy, so that many parts of Europe have suddenly got gigantic energy bills, and they're having to change the way that they deal with electricity and everything to do with the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure of their lives. And then the other thing that's happening is the economies are affected by inflation. And so all of these things are stresses on individuals, but they're also a stress on a much bigger community. And it's not just on a nation, but it's on continents. And I feel that it's a global thing. And another thing which is impacting us a great deal is climate change. And in the last 2 years, there has been enormous and drastic effect on us of changes in the climate. And that has forced everyone to rethink who they are and how they live and all of that. And then if we bring it to the spiritual dimension, from my perspective, I'm seeing that even the way that I think about spirituality and the way that I do my spiritual practice is also shifting and changing, because the circumstances around it are also changing, and the people involved are also changing. So the practice of Raj Yoga that I do began in the 1930s, so the mid-1930s, that is before the Second World War. And this was done in India before the independence of India. So India was very much part of the British colonial empire. And at that time, Gandhi was working, Rabindranath Tagore was working, and there were these movements in India for freedom, for independence, and for establishing what they called as Ram Rajya, the kingdom of Ram. And this is a legendary kingdom, and people wanted to be spiritually potent and free and all of these things. So in that atmosphere of that time, which was also an atmosphere where World War happened, and then India got independence, there was this huge division between India and Pakistan, West Pakistan, and the whole world changed. And in the middle of all of that, a quite small group of people, mostly women, got called to a spiritual life from an inner dimension. And this grew slowly, but it was an accelerating growth. And in the 1970s, it reached England, Hong Kong, Africa, Australia. It spread. And I was the first person from the West who came into the practice in the context of the way that they set up centers in the Western world. And so that was in London, where Madhavi is. And so I was also experiencing in my life a lot of shifting going on, a strong calling, dreams and visions, and this and that was going on. And at the time, I was doing my job and I was working in the BBC. So I was involved in media and communication. And that was also the time when there was this big movement of anti-apartheid in Africa. So we were very aware about that. There were lots of political issues going on, social issues going on. And there were big changes in the culture because of, the new music that was coming in from the Beatles and from Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and all of these responses to the American war in Vietnam and Cambodia. And the whole society was shaken up socially, politically, and spiritually. And I was in the middle of all of that. So I found it very interesting, very exciting, very relevant. And these huge movements that were going on among young people, among university students, and so on, to bring about change. And I was very, very much part of all that. So my being is, I'm an innovator. I'm very interested in change. I'm very interested in new things that are coming, new movements in art and literature. And, now we live in the world of high speed change in the technology, communications technology, medical technology. Everything is moving forward very, very fast. So we have a lot of movement. And then the human side of it, human relations, human happiness, quality of life, and so on, is also shaking. And that is also making a lot of people interested in meditation. So there are lots and lots of different kinds of meditation going on. When I first came in, it was considered really out there, really weird, very different. But for me, it was exactly the thing that was relevant, needed. It was timely. And for me to develop myself spiritually made all the sense in the world. And now, 50 years later, I'm still doing the practice, and I love the practice, and I love the information, and I've made it the foundation of my life. And your life is always in a context. And of course, the other thing is, you may start something when you're in your 20s, but you don't stay in your 20s. You go through your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, and now 70s. So obviously, you change, you grow, you mature. And life for someone in their 20s has a different meaning, and you have different values and different priorities than when you're in your 70s. Because when you're in your 70s, the next thing is soon you will die. So you have to think about that. And you have to think about what has been your life and what is your life and what are you doing. And there's one very important yogi in the Brahma Kumaris who I was very close to. She was a great influencer in my life, and that was Dadi Janki. And she left her body right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. And that was also a very interesting moment. And at that time, I was doing spiritual service in California, in America. And all of a sudden, everything was locked down. So I was over there in the center there, with a very beautiful group of yogis. And the center is very near the big Golden Gate Park. And, when you're a meditator and you're living in a meditation center, you're quite focused on the inner life, and you're not so caught up in the outer activities that most people are, that's important in their lives, and children and school and, activities, all the activities that people do. And all that was stopped by COVID. But for us, it didn't really change things too much because we were quite focused on our inner life, and we spent a lot of time in the center as opposed to going out all over the place. So I didn't really experience that much difference, but what we were very aware of was how important it was in this experience of the COVID lockdown to have a solid spiritual practice under your belt, because in the COVID lockdown, there were a lot of issues to do with vaccinations, to do with not being able to see people who were going to hospital, lots of people dying, and all of these things were happening. And yet we were not disturbed by it, but the people around us who were not doing meditation, they found it very disturbing. And so we realized, what a fortune it is, what a fortune it has been to have spent all these years, studying to be dispassionate, to be calm, to be able to manage stress, to be flexible around all kinds of different personalities, all kinds of different situations. And it really showed us that we had actually acquired natural abilities that we didn't really even notice until they were tested by this new situation. So that was a very interesting thing for me. And I also, saw that in the more or less 2 years that the world passed through this COVID issues and lockdown and so on, that during this time, a lot of things changed. And my feeling was as circumstances changed and people were not right there to monitor it because everybody was locked down. And then when you come out of the lockdown, you find you come out into a world where there were many kinds of new normals. And meanwhile, climate change got a lot worse. The education situation got more stressed. Children got much more levels of anxiety. So I see that right now, it's like a really good time to rethink and reevaluate and recheck everything about who I am and what I'm doing and so on and so forth, and how am I doing it. And one of the things that Dadi Janki left as a legacy, very much on purpose, she spent a lot of time getting people to listen to these last words that she wanted to leave with people. And a word that we use very often in those spiritual practices is Om Shanti. You may have heard this word Om Shanti, which simply means I am a soul at peace. And she used to say Om Shanti 3 times. And she would say that, why do I say it 3 times? One is Om Shanti means, who am I? And the second Om Shanti means, who am I in relationship with? And the third Om Shanti means, what am I doing? And these 3 questions, who am I in relationship with? That means what am I influenced by? And what am I doing? These are key questions in a person's life, which whenever circumstances change, you have to go back to these 3 questions and really answer it for yourself. And you have to answer it truthfully and deeply. So when there are a change of circumstances, it calls on a person to do a deep, extreme self-analysis. That, okay, who am I? Because when you're thinking of your identity when you're young, you think about what you're going to do, what kind of family life do you want, what kind of career do you want, where do you want to live, what kind of lifestyle do you want, what sort of group of people do you want to be around, or what sort of activities do you want to do, and you create your identity in that way. And when you do that, you make choices. And you make choices which always have consequences. And the consequences are, 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. There are good consequences and there are not so good consequences. And you just have to take the rough with the smooth, because when you make choices and you act on those choices, they are irrevocable choices. You can't just unchoose it just like that. If it's really bad, you can leave a marriage, you can leave a career and start again, but that is, you reinvent yourself. And so reinventing yourself is connected with things being really, really stressful, or you could say bad. But sometimes things are really good. And even when things are really good and you have a lot of success, you also have to reinvent yourself in that situation, because circumstances are dramatically different. And so you have to think about who you are and what you're doing and who you're doing it with and why are you doing what you're doing, you see. And it's really good to do that every so often. Another thing that happens to people, which causes them to have to reinvent themselves, is when there is a health crisis. And there are many people who were very substantially affected by COVID. Other people have long COVID. And there are many people that I know who got cancer. They have to deal with it. They be cancer survivors, but it's still, you have to pay attention and make adjustments in your life. And you also find that with aging, even if your health is good, you're slower than you were. You may be not working anymore. You shift to retirement, and you have to think, okay, who am I? What are the influences? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? And then you reinvent yourself. You have to. Because if you don't reinvent yourself and try and force things to be the way they were, they won't. It just won't work. And so this sort of internal personal flexibility around stressful circumstances which force your life to be a different way than what it was. Now, if you can manage that, you're really, really ahead. And even though you may do something which you don't have any guarantees for, there are risks involved. And this is one of the things that I became very aware of, the importance of being able to take risks. Because when I was shifting from where I was to the place I am now, many people would say to me, oh, but you can't do that. You don't know what's going to happen. I mean, how can you do that? And I would think, I would say, well, you have to take a risk. And there's a difference between a reckless risk and a calculated risk, you see. And so for me to move to the country where I'm living is quite manageable, because I happen to be a citizen of this country. So I don't have to change my citizenship. I'm already a citizen of this country. and I already have good command of the language, so there's not an issue about that. But every country has a different culture, it's different people. I have a very large number of relatives here, so I had to very much reconnect with relatives who I hadn't had much contact with for a long time, and that's also, you know, each thing that you take up is like a project, and you have to give a time and attention to it, and it becomes an element or a very important ingredient of your life. And then the location, you have to manage the location. I went from quite a small place to relatively much larger place. So, you know, how do I set up the place so that I can pursue the spiritual practice and the spiritual service that has been my track over, I mean, many, many years. I started in communications since I was 18. I started working with photography since I was 9 years old. So, and I've always been, you know, in this general direction, but maybe in a different place, maybe with different people. And so, you know, when you're analyzing yourself and you're reinventing yourself, there are some parts in which there is continuity. And so you have to identify those parts, and you have to give them space and energy and right positioning in your life, and assign time and importance to those things that are the continuity thread that make up a part of your identity that doesn't change. It may get modified, it may become you might have a slightly different style, or you may yourself grow. And as you grow, you don't grow in a single line like some people think growth should be, but you have spurts of growth followed by quieter times. But even with the spurts and the quieter times, and even when you're reinventing yourself totally, there is just a lot about your identity that is a continuing thread, and it may change a bit, but it's a recognizable, undeniable element of your identity that is like fixed. And then around that, you create new decoration, you create new language, new location, new activities, new friends, all of these things. And there may be parts of your life that were not happening because it wasn't time or something, and all of a sudden it's time for that part of you to open up and flow. And other parts of you which were like a big deal, they're not so important, and you don't give them so much attention, they fall away. It's like they're part of a younger period of time, they're no longer so important. And you see the world itself changes, and we also have to keep up with the changes and not be, I don't know, not get fossilized in another era where we just don't know what's happening in this time. So I keep up with what's happening in art and in music, and what the young people are doing, what they're thinking, what's important to them. I like to keep my pulse on that. And I think that's very good for me, because it allows me not to be limited by a particular generation. So that a lot of my very close friends are 20, 30, 40 years younger than me. And I have very good close friends who are in my age group, but I have a big influence in my life from the younger people. And I find that very invigorating and energizing, and it allows me to keep up with the new things that are going on in this world with artificial intelligence, with how the internet is influencing people's lives, with how people relate to each other in social media, and what is my relationship with nature. I've always had a very good relationship with nature my whole life, but nature is changing, climate change is going on, and so your relationship with nature also has to take into consideration that nature is itself kind of disturbed and reinventing itself. So your reinvention of yourself is also in the context of the whole society around you undergoing drastic epochal changes, and nature itself is also undergoing big change. And people say that the most stressful thing you can do is change, move, change your family life, change your career, change your location. And yet I have experienced the great value of that my spiritual practice has given me, that allows me to be easy about doing something totally new and different in a totally new and different place with totally new and different people, which changes my relationship with the people I was more involved with in previous times, So you have to create bridges between yourself and your new self, because your new self isn't totally new. There's bits of it that are new, but there's lots of it that are not new. But at the same time, change is a continuing thing. And so you need to be flexible about the slow process of aging and maturing, and the rather jerky process of having to reinvent yourself when circumstances suddenly become so drastically different that you don't have the leisure to think whether I will change or not, or do it or not. It's a kind of forced on you, and you have to respond to it proactively. And that's also something that the spiritual practice has given me this flexibility, and I really am thankful and appreciative for that. And at the time when I was being given all this training in spiritual practice, part of it was to create disturbances in the form of whatever you expected, it would be changed, and you would be given a completely unexpected assignment, and then that would be stopped, and then you would be given a different unexpected assignment. So this was going on quite a bit, very consciously, to develop in us, me and my other friends who were in the spiritual practice. And it was consciously being done because it was said, you need to develop this flexibility so that you can flex with substantial, maybe even drastic changes of situation, changes of circumstances, so that you can flex with it and manage it easily. And it certainly has stood me in good stead. And what it's also done, which I think is very helpful, is to to put me in a mentality where I'm really not concerned about change. I'm really not concerned about going somewhere where I don't know anybody and I don't know what's going on, and and it's all completely different. I don't worry about that because it has given me a kind of faith in myself that I know who I am. And wherever I am and in whatever circumstances I am in, I'm still me, you know. I mean, I remember there was someone who said, "Oh, you look different." I said, "Okay, I look different, but I'm the same person." And, you know, some changes external, you know, you might suddenly get gray hair or then you decide, okay, you've got to color your hair or not color your hair. Well, you know, if you do, that's a big change. If you don't, or you revert back to, people say you look different, or you may get different glasses, or you may have some health issue that happened to you so that there was an effect on your appearance. If you have cancer, you may lose your hair. And so people relate to you so much based on what you look like and what clothes you wear and what car you drive and what, you know, all these physical things. They're part of your identity, but they are not your identity. They're sort of decoration, they are attributes, but your identity is an internal thing. And this is another thing that I think spiritual practice is very important, as it makes you focus your attention on the being, you know, who is this person? And the person cannot be evaluated by what they look like or their performance. If they have to perform under certain circumstances, their little script that they do, that's not them, you know. And when you're relating to yourself, you cannot identify yourself with your performance. And by performance, I mean maybe in your career you have to function in a certain way, look a certain way, do certain things in order to fulfill the requirements of that career. And then people say, you know, this person is this career, but no, you know, if you retire, then you're not that career anymore. And some people, when they're so defined by their career and then all of a sudden they're not doing that anymore, they don't know what to do. And it becomes very, very stressful when you're retired because all of your identity has disappeared. And so people have to deal with that. And it's normal in life. You have your childhood, you have your teenage years, you start creating your life, you create your family, you create your career, and after some time, you give it all up, you know, and you're retired, and then you get ready to leave this life, and that is the nature of life. But not everybody thinks about that. But in spiritual practice, all the time, we are made aware of the different stages of life, and all the time made aware that you have to think about yourself. Who are you now? Who were you 10 years ago? Who were you 20 years from now? What do you think about this? So we very much keep ourselves, I definitely keep myself in the context of time, in the context of the process, the journey of life, and that you do go through different terrains for which you need different internal equipment, just as people have different summer clothes and winter clothes, or sporting clothes, or, you know, stuff that goes with the activity that you do. So also there are internal tools that you work with at different stages of your life. And when you're shifting from one stage to another, reinvention is absolutely normal and required. But, you know, people don't really always get an education about that. And then they get surprised because they have to kind of figure it out because there's no preparation for it. Other people, they do prepare for it, they do find out. So it depends on the individual and depends on the circumstances. But I think that because there's so much change going on in the world today at every level, politically, environmentally, socially, all these things, that it's difficult for people to manage this very, very rapidly changing world that we're in. And so I highly recommend that bring in a spiritual component to your life, because that is going to give you an element of continuity in the midst of all of this change, because who you are doesn't change. How you function changes, how you present yourself changes, how you think about yourself changes, but who you are is who you are. And in the process of discovering the depth of who you are, you become the essential self, which is the very, very best thing that anyone could do. You're totally connected with yourself, you're in your power, and you are you're complete, you're fulfilled. And that is really what I think life is all about. And if you can do that, then you can say had a successful life. So I'm going to stop there because I'm sure that Madhavi has a few questions, and some of you also have some thoughts about all this. So let's move to that part.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Denise. Okay. Yeah, that was really interesting. And the one thing I was thinking about you, you were just sharing, but I've known you, 15 plus years, and I've seen that you are the same with every generation of people. I've seen you mix with the youngsters. I've seen you mix with, college students. I've seen all those scenarios, and you just seem to really get on. You seem to vibe very well with all of them. And I think that is something very refreshing. I got a private question. Let me just read that out to you. And she's saying, I have realized that I have a lot of fear in the subconscious. How do I dig deeply into what and why it is there? And how do I get over that?
I think a lot of people have fear, and I have looked at the phenomenon of fear quite a lot. Because, people, I remember there was a time when people said to me, oh, your problem is you have fear. And I didn't feel that I had fear, but people were giving me that feedback. So I thought, let me check, what kind of things do people have fear of? Of course, I suppose the most important one is people have fear of death. So I thought, well, I wonder if I have fear of death or not. And then people have fear of something terrible happening to them, like accident or something like that, or fear of heights, or fear of flying. There are lots of different phobias that people have, or fear of snakes and fear of dogs and fear of all sorts of things. So quite soon after, this person had said to me, your problem is you're afraid of everything. So I thought, let me check, And it just happened that I was with somebody who said, would you like to go skydiving? So I said, sure. And I thought, here's an opportunity for me to see whether I have fear of that, because it's, for a lot of people, jumping out of an airplane while it's flying, people would think, ooh, we can't do that. But skydiving means that. So it was the first time I'd done it. So the way you do it is you do what's called as a tandem jump. So you attach yourself with a harness to somebody else who knows how to do it, and off you go. And so I was in this circumstance, and there were all these other skydivers who were like kind of big rugby player guys. And they look at little me and they say, "Are you afraid?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, you should be afraid." And I said, "Well, I'm terribly sorry, but I'm not," because the guy who I was harnessed to, was supposed to be, you tie the harness up just before you jump. He seemed very competent to me. I had full faith that whatever it was we were going to do would be just fine. And he said to me, "Oh, what do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I don't know. What are the possibilities?" So it was like diving. So he said, "Well, you could do a triple backflip." So I said, "Okay, let's do a triple backflip." And so he said, "Okay, well, you got to jump out of the airplane backwards." So I said, "Okay, I'll do whatever you say." So we got up to 16,000 feet, which was double the normal height because it was the last flight of the day. So I thought, great, and we were way above the clouds and I could see the landscape way below. I normally fly on airplanes here and there, so it's often that I see that scene. And so he said, "Okay, let's go." And so off we went, and we did triple backflip, and then we did 10,000 feet free fall, which is quite fast, high speed. You're going at nearly 200 miles an hour. And then he opens up the canopy, and then we float down. It takes 1 minute to go down the 10,000 feet and 7 minutes to go down the remaining 6,000 feet. And so we were having this nice conversation while coming down. And I was all the while feeling myself to check, am I afraid of any of this? Is my heart rate going high? Am I having adrenaline? Am I scared in any way, mentally, physically? What are the various signals? And I found I actually wasn't. And then I thought, do you land like a bird or do you land like an insect, And I was thinking that, and then I just decided that, the way you land is like an insect. You kind of bend your knees and land, And that was very nice. So I thought, yeah, no, this type of thing I'm not afraid of. So that's good. Then I had another situation where I got carried out to sea by an undertow, and I'm not that strong of a swimmer. And I thought, oh my God, I could die actually right now. And then I thought, am I afraid? And I wasn't. And so I thought, and I got this thought, yeah, you could die right now, but it's not time. So I said, well, if it's not time, I better get back to the shore. So let's go. And I was using the surf because it was very big surf, which is why I got carried out. And it was a big struggle, but I got back, and at the end of that, I thought, okay, I'm not afraid of death. So I'm not afraid of jumping out of airplanes. I'm not afraid of death. Some people, they're afraid of people. They're afraid of all the things that happen in social situations where you can get lose face, or a lot of people are afraid of losing face. A lot of people are afraid of admitting to their weaknesses, lots and lots of things. Some people are afraid of their emotions, and many different kinds of fears and things are going on. And so I just thought that the way to do it is, because you don't really know necessarily what you're really afraid of. I think different people are afraid of different things. I remember watching the movie called Fearless, which is about a man who was afraid of flying, and then he was in an airplane crash, and he got over his fear of flying by going into it, So I thought that, and I think that it's important it's not that fear is a bad thing. Fear is very healthy. I know somebody who has no fear of anything, and that person has serious personality problems because there are no limitations. You see, fear is an energy that says, be careful because there's some danger here. So you better, understand that fear is not a vice, fear is not a weakness. It is an energy that lets you know that, hey, you're inexperienced here, you be careful, you don't know what you're doing, you need to check out things and see whether it's misplaced fear or whether it's necessary fear or whether you want to be over this fear or that fear, and you work with it. And I think that that's a very healthy thing to do.
You are very brave, and I mean, you decided to go into it. I think Mina is sort of saying she doesn't know how to find out. She knows she's got fear, but have you got any tips on how she can bring that out, or go deeper to understand where the fear is coming from? Is there anything that you could suggest?
There's two things. One is an expression, which was a slogan for a particular institute that helps children get through cancer. And their slogan was, love is letting go of fear.
Beautiful.
And that's very interesting, because then it means that you can think of your fear and then also think of the word love and see if part of your fear is that you're not allowing yourself to, or you haven't understood how to love. And so the fear is taken over where there should be love. And so you can think about that. And by thinking about it, just be going into circumstances, whatever other circumstances you need, they will come. But you have to recognize that this circumstance is here to help me to do this work, if it's to do with fear. Then another thing about fear is, that is often said, is fear means you have to face your fear. And I think that the power to face, it's one of the powers that we learn about in Raj Yoga, the power to face. And I remember one time years ago, I've been doing this spiritual practice nearly 50 years, so I had lots of opportunities to figure it out a million different ways. But I remember deciding I would spend one whole year on the power to face, so that I would really kind of analyze it and see, okay, now what is this power to face? And I would try to invoke it and say, okay, I want to understand what this is, and I want to acquire this. And so I just opened myself up to the power to face. And what do I have to face? Because one thing you have to face is yourself. Another thing you have to face is what happened to you in life. Another thing you have to face is, the betrayals, the disappointments, all the bad things that happen. Everybody has different types of bad things happen. You face it, go through it, and get experience in the reality of it. And I think in many cases, fear is avoiding facing something. And so if Mina feels afraid, okay, go into that feeling and really talk to yourself about, okay, what are you afraid of? And let that thing come closer. You can really feel it to see whether, one thing that happens, especially in to Indian girls, is the society trains Indian girls to be afraid of many things that you don't have to be afraid of, like dogs, for example. Lots of young Indian girls are terrified of dogs because they've been trained to be terrified of dogs. And unless you get the idea that the only reason you're afraid of this is because you've been told to be afraid of it, and that you never really checked out whether you're really afraid or not, and whether this is a really dangerous thing or not, You have to go through it and work through it and decide, is this real, or is this just something somebody has put on me? Because people, as they grow up, there's lots of people wanting to put things on you and mold you this way, that way, or the other way, which may or may not be a good thing. And in case of fear, there are some kids who are grown up with a lot of opportunities to face different kinds of fears of different types of danger, and they learn how to handle dangerous situations. But if you learn to avoid dangerous situations, then you're always going to be at a disadvantage. And then it's a lot of work to go through that in later age. But whatever it is, you have to do it.
Interesting what you were saying about the cancer groups, because obviously I belong to a cancer group. And one of the key things I found there is most of the souls there were not afraid of dying. What they're afraid of is spending a period of their life towards the end being so helpless and like a vegetable and dependent on others. And how would you suggest we help that?
Well, it's something that you have to decide. You see, when you have a life-threatening illness, I just had a very good friend of mine who very recently left the body because of cancer. And he discovered he had cancer at a time when it had metastasized pretty widely. And he made a decision that he will not take any chemotherapy or any radiation or anything, and that he will just go. And and you have a right to do that. And so he did that. And of course, as he got closer to the end, there was a lot of pain. So he was taking morphine to do pain management. And his cancer was such that he had to be in a wheelchair, and then he had to be just in a bed. So there were a few people, really trusted people, who were around him, but he knew it was going to be really fast. And he attended a program that I did just a couple of weeks or so before he died, and he wanted, more than anything, he wanted me to address the subject of how to die.
Wow.
Because that was what was the next thing on his agenda. And so I kind of incorporated it into the event that I was doing, which had about 10 sessions, and there would be meditations that were specially about it and so on. And I think that he really liked that. He was very attentive, very interested, very alert, and applying it, with a lot of good faith. And he left quick, you see. I think what's a problem is when people go into the medical system and they go for every imaginable treatment, hoping and hoping and hoping that they will get better. And some do, and some don't. And I remember my sister-in-law had multiple sclerosis, very, very rapid. And there was a time when the family had to decide, when she was hospitalized, the hospital said, this is in England, they said, okay, we can do full life support, we can do partial life support, and we can do no life support. And if we do full life support, she will live for 2 weeks. And if we do partial life support, she will live for 1 week. And if we do nothing, she will live for a few days. What do you want? And we said, do nothing.
Yeah.
And we were just with her, and we knew it would be quick. And my feeling is that if you are with people that you trust and who are not emotionally out of order, but who are really there for you as you transition, and nobody's afraid of it. It's normal. It's what happens next, and everything can be done in a really good way, because otherwise you just extend your life of pain rather than extend quality life. So now in the medical profession, they're thinking about, quality of life rather than amount of time that they can add to your medical bills.
Ganesh is saying, rediscover and reinvent. How do you differentiate? Reinvent is something new completely, i.e., not within you. Is that correct?
Well, you have to define the word however you decide to define it, because it's quite open. What is the meaning of reinventing the self? But what I think is a good way to think about it is to just go down to the very basics. I mean, I'll give you an example. I have a brother who bought an old house with the intention of renovating it completely. And so he decided, okay, yeah, this is the house that I want to work with. And he kept the basic structure, but he looked at all the bits of it that needed attention. The full electricity had to be redone. The whole drainage system had to be redone. The floors had to be made level. And, another person I knew was renovating, they had to raise the height of the roof, So you have your basic self. And then the way it is, it kind of gets old like an old house, and you need to rejuvenate it. So you could say rejuvenate yourself, even though you're still getting old anyway. But this expression, reinvent yourself, is quite commonly used when a person wants to just go down to the real core of themselves and rebuild themselves up from the bottom up. And to redo that, there's a video that was going around about the eagle, and the eagle gets old, and then the claws don't work so well, and the eyes don't work so well, and the beak doesn't work so well, and the wings don't work so well. So the eagle, when it gets to X number of years, I don't know, 10 years old or 15 years old or something, has this choice. And it requires great courage, because the eagle has to pluck out its claws, and then it has to pluck out all its feathers, and then it has to pluck out its eyes, and then it has to let the beak fall off and wait while it grows again, you see. And it's a very powerful analogy, because, they show the visuals of this eagle doing all this. And then the eagle gets new life and starts flying away with the new beak and the new claws and new feathers and the new eyes. And so it gets another 10 years of life. So I think that there's something like that people like to do for themselves. They get inspired to reinvent themselves. I mean, not everybody does, but this is a subject for today, and it's something that I have done a few times in my life, actually. And so I thought, reinvent myself again. Okay, I'll reinvent myself again. And I don't expect to have to reinvent myself another time. I'm getting on. But I thought, okay, I'll reinvent myself. So you kind of get an internal sort of message that says, okay, you can reinvent yourself again now. Get going.
Excellent. And I can say that every time you've reinvented yourself, you come out stronger and better and, wonderful, full of energy. And I think that's really inspiring. Okay, there is a question here, anonymous again. Although I do not feel depressed as such, generally, I do not experience any enthusiasm or motivation in life. Since coming to on the spiritual path, it seems to have got worse. Any thoughts?
Do not expect somebody or something or an organization to do your work for you. You have to do your own work. And if you think that something is going to be done for you from the outside, you will get no enthusiasm and you will get depressed because you're not doing the work. And I think in a situation like that, sitting down and reinventing yourself would be a very, very good thing to do, because you'd have to make yourself do the work of making yourself into the self that you want to be, and like take responsibility and be ready to do the work. And it's very hard work. And you might be able to have some people who will give you some tips and some exercises and some stuff to do about it. But I think a lot of time when that happens, what you're talking about, is because you think the world is going to do it for you, or an organization will do it for you, or God will do it for you, or somebody will do it for you. They won't.
Anne is asking a general question. How do you see life without internet, Denise?
Oh, it's very interesting. Life without internet. I had 2 months without internet, and I'm on the internet all day and all night, kind of thing. So I'm a very internet-minded person. And it was very interesting because I was just with myself and with my environment, and I understood that I'm really not dependent on internet, because I could do without it just fine, and turn my attention to the non-internet state of being, which was actually very nice. I was not able to do a lot of my work, you see, because my work involves making videos, going on YouTube, answering lots of people's things and questions, and doing assignments that people want help with or something like that. So I couldn't do any of that. So I had endless pending work. And in the meantime, I'm just there with myself. And so I just turned my attention to things that were around me that needed doing, and I will do them. And if anybody said, oh, where is my this and where is my that, I would say, sorry, no internet, I'll let you know. And it was interesting because the internet people were supposed to come on a particular day, and then they said, oh, well, we couldn't find your address. And I said, well, that's really difficult not to find my address. Then they said, well, we didn't have your phone number. I said, you're the people who gave me the phone number, so how come you don't know my phone number? Mm-hmm. And then it all turned out that it wasn't anything like that, but it was, there was no fiber optic line going into my building. So I said, well, you could have told me that before, couldn't you? And so then the day came where they came along with their drills and their crane and everything, and they put it in, and then I had it. And so, yeah, but I think the important thing is that you have to adjust with what your situation is right then and there, and what you can do, and what you can't do, you can't do. And that's just the way it is. So I think it goes back to what I was talking earlier about the flexibility, which we learned in my training in Raj Yoga. The people who were training us would change our circumstances quite strongly, quite ruthlessly, and get us to be really flexible with all that stuff. And if this thing is not possible, then you do that thing. If that thing's not possible, and if there's nothing, then you do nothing. Because you can always meditate, you see.
Well, there was a comment here. It's not really a question, but this sister saying she's one of the new Zoom babies, and she's saying, She finds it hard to get support at the moment. The way you were talking about how much your seniors, like especially Dati Jankin, all sort of helped you along and gave you like a one-to-one focus. They say it's quite difficult now for them to get that.
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is delete the word Zoom baby. Anyone who's a baby expects to have some parents and everything doing everything for them. So any word related to babies or children or little ones or newbies or any of that,
get rid of it.
Never use that language. Never use it, because it immediately disempowers the person. And that is really spiritually incorrect. So it's like very important not to use that sort of language, so that you present to people, okay, here you are, this is what we have. In the old days, it was possible to have one-on-one. When you come in this, you're not going to get support. Now, if you tell people you're a newbie and you're a little baby and you're going to get support and they don't get it, they're going to feel shortchanged, and they will be shortchanged because you have made a promise that you have not fulfilled, and that's ethically wrong. But what is better is to say, okay, there's a lot of people going on this practice, there's all sorts of events and this and that and the other, and teach people and present it to people in such a way that it's not about somebody doing the work for you. That's very important. Otherwise, you set up an expectation that you don't fulfill, and that's not right.
The more you keep on saying to yourself, I'm one of the Zoom babies and I'm this and this, then it's never going to work, because it doesn't empower you. So I think from now on, okay, nobody will use that term. Okay, good. So Gloria's asking, she says, do you think there is a specific time for people to awake for inner transformation? Or do you, of time will wait for people, or will time wait for people to awaken? What do you think is going to happen, Gloria saying?
In the practice of Raj Yoga, the way that it was set up, it is known anyway that the early morning hours are very good for meditation, because the vibration is good, people are quiet, nobody will bother you, it's ideal time. And so if you create a routine where you take advantage of the early morning time and the shift in the evening from the busy professional working time to the more quiet time of the evening, and do your meditation at both ends of the day, many people have found that this is very good. And if you do not create a specific rhythm of time, you will not meditate that much. If you just meditate when you feel like it, then you will not meditate as much as if you establish a discipline of time. And if you meditate insufficiently and inadequately and sporadically, you won't be able to build up the spiritual power, and then you will get frustrated and irritated and think that there's something wrong with the practice. The practice is okay, but then you have to practice it in the optimum way. But everyone's individual. Some people can do it really intensively, and that's fine. Not everybody is an Olympic champion. And so you need to find what you can do and do it. And you can intensify your level of practice by 3 or 4%, because that's doable. If you try and do it more than that, you're going to put too much pressure on yourself and you're going to give up. So it's not worth it. And don't compare yourself with everybody else, because they're all doing it their way. May or may not be telling you the truth about what they're doing.
Exactly. And I think, no, but you're right. And I think sometimes, especially in a group, these things sort of tend to happen and, whatever. But I love what the point you made there. And that is a very helpful point. You are on your own journey and, enjoy it. So Sue is asking a question that in the 50s and 60s, people sang songs to protest about the state of the world or whatever. But now, either they react in a very aggressive way or they've just become more complacent. I mean, do you see, like, especially about the daily catastrophes, she's saying, they tend to see it as normal. Do you believe that there is a hopelessness in the world today?
Well, I think also that during the 50s and 60s, there was also complacency. There were tons and tons of turning the other way, plenty of blindness and avoidance. The way you think of what happened in the 50s and 60s may not be what actually happened in the 50s and 60s. But that all depends on what piece of literature you're looking at and who wrote it and what their intention was by writing it. Very difficult to get truth. I think that there are lots of people in the world who are hopeless. I think that the amount of difficulties, I was calculating how many people at the present moment are displaced. So I checked on Google how many people are displaced at the present moment and how many people are displaced in the Ukraine war, how many people are displaced by the Pakistan floods, how many people are displaced by some other wars and so on. And it came to hundreds of millions, which is the largest amount of refugees in the world that there has ever been. Refugees, displaced people outside their countries, displaced people inside their countries who have no place to go, who have no support service, who have no money. And, people in those situations can very easily get hopeless, very easily. And if you have a hopeless situation and you have a person who is full of hope and full of determination, that's a very powerful energy that enthuses and energizes the other people around them because they're saying no to hopelessness. And it's so easy to say yes to hopelessness, but if you're strong and you decide to be strong and you affirm your strength, this is really a very good form of leadership, and it helps other people get through circumstances that are really, really difficult to get through. So that means you're a very valuable person if you don't succumb to hopelessness.
Thank you so much for that. Okay. So Anik is saying, she's got a phobia of technology, anything related to it, and she seems to freeze. She experiences a total block physically, and that she says her brain just goes blank. I could read and study complex material, but if it in any other subject, but if it relates to technology, as far as she is concerned, it could be written in Chinese. What can she do about it? Is this something internal that's, blocking her, do you think?
There's many possibilities, but it's not possible for me to diagnose it like that. But, it is a phenomenon. We are in a world where if you are not good in technology, you are penalized for it. And that is unfair, definitely, but it's how the world is at the moment. So it means that if you have a problem with technology, it's a very big disadvantage. And so you need to see if you can find ways around it with other people helping you, or finding ways to do what you have to do without the technology part of it preventing you from doing it, and just be really creative. And another possibility is to really use the power to face and redefine what you think technology is, because certainly it has an energy in it that may be connected with some psychological issue that may still be unclear. Maybe even something from another life if you're very young, because nowadays, people get born knowing how to work a mobile phone.
Mm.
That's something that carries from life to life,
It's a sister saying, what if you feel you've woken up from a 20-year sleep and have total clarity about the past, but now totally clueless about what the future should look like? Any tips?
Nobody knows what the future will be. And whether it should or should not be a certain way, I wouldn't try that. I would just be open to it. What will it be? We'll see, wait and see. But at the same time, you have to be realistic and take care of yourself as much as possible in the event of this or that possibility in the future, because we know what the trends are. And so we have a very good idea about what the future is likely to be. Whether it should or shouldn't be, that doesn't make any difference to anything. But you need to know what the trends are. And the trends are there's going to be food shortages, energy shortages, lots of madness, lots of difficulties. And so keep your life as simple as possible. Make sure that you have, food and water and medicines and so on in the event that there are shortages, because there are. Like right now, there's a big shortage of olive oil. Last month, there was a big shortage of mustard, which is not going to be the end of the world. But the big thing is, there's a big shortage of gas. And when the winter comes, you will have to put your sweaters on, 10 or 15 of them, because there will be no heating. And that will not be nice. Whether it should or shouldn't be like that, maybe we can't do anything about it. But you need to try to make sure that you are prepared for eventualities so that it doesn't really take you by surprise and cause you a lot of distress.
Okay, Gina is saying she feels like she is drowning. My son, she says, died last year, and now my mother is dying, and I don't know how to save myself in this situation. Now, I know, Denise, you've said lots of very powerful things that, Gina could use, but if you'd like to add on just a couple of sentences for her especially.
Well, it happens to people. And a very good friend of mine is in a similar situation where just lots and lots of people around her, very, very close ones, are dying and leaving the body. And she's like, less and less people that are her close people, they're all disappearing. And what happens when you get older is that happens. You go to more and more funerals, more and more people dying. And if it's your child that dies, that's very, very stressful, because that's untimely death. It's always more stressful than someone who is older and they die. But I think that other people dying doesn't mean that you're dying.
Mm.
And it's when you're surrounded by circumstances of a lot of people dying, it means you have to think about what is the meaning of living and dying. And these are spiritual questions, these are metaphysical questions, and they're important questions to sit with and think about. And think about your immortality, and think about everybody else's immortality, and think about how time is and how everything passes. It arises, it endures for some time, and it passes away, and something else arises. And that is the nature of life. And this is one of the very famous quotes from the Gita, Bhagavad Gita. Everything comes into being, lasts for some time, and then it passes on. That is life. And so maybe it's an opportunity for you to really make contact with the transience of the appearance of life, because there's aspects of life which are not visible.
Mm.
The soul is not visible. Your immortality is not visible. It's not tangible, but it doesn't mean it's not there. And when you're surrounded by death, it forces you to make contact with that which continues for all time. And that's very, very positive.
Thank you. Mangla is asking, she says, I know a person who needs to change in his life. Don't we all? But hey, that's not okay. To move to other areas for better prospects. But this person is not ready to make this decision. So how can anyone help?
Well, does anybody have to help?
No.
You see, so this is the thing. I mean, it happens to many of us. You see somebody and you find out what's wrong with them and you think, oh, this should be not like that and that should be not like that. And anybody who has tried to change another person meets with disappointment because it's not your job. And if their unwillingness to change or inability to change bothers you, you need to take a look at yourself and understand that you are not living that person's life. They're living their own life, and you don't really have control over whether they live or they die or they're happy or they're unhappy. What you have to do is look at what you're doing. And if you're doing the right thing, that person may or may not appreciate it, may or may not listen to good advice, but you do it and then you let go. And then you're staying within the limits of what is your job and not trying to do what cannot be done and getting upset about it.
Sister Denise, how can we reinvent ourselves while constantly keeping up the positive lessons and habits we have learned from maybe past mistakes?
Well, those two parts of the sentence don't have anything to do with each other. Yes, you are in the context of all the good and bad things that you have done, and you reinvent yourself, I think, when circumstances force it. I don't think anybody reinvents themselves just because it's a good idea, you know. Circumstances become such that it is not possible to continue the way you were. It's finished, it's over. And that is the circumstance in which you reinvent yourself, whether you want to or not. And how to reinvent yourself. Daddy Yankee used to not like it when we would say how to do this and how to do that. She would say, don't ask a question like that. Just do it. And this is the Nike ad, which is so famous, you know. So get yourself that T-shirt which says, just do it. And look in the mirror while you're wearing it and just do it. And you make it up as you go along. And there will be mistakes and there will be things that work out really well. So if you make a mistake, then just pick yourself up and get on and do it a different way, because what else are you going to do? Nothing wrong with mistakes. You learn from mistakes. You don't learn from success. You learn from failure.
Fabulous, fabulous session as always, Denise. And like I said, you know, you always come from here. And I think everybody values it so much. It comes through wonderful guidance from you and lots of love. And big thanks to you. We are 15 minutes over the program. So I'm just wondering, would you like to do a 2-minute short meditation, please, Denise?
Okay, let's just go quiet and calm and know that it is absolutely in your hands to become calm just by deciding. And even when there are very trying, stressful circumstances, let it push you into that inner place of calm. And be easy and calm. And know that all the things that are whirling around you, they're whirling, but you're still, you're quiet, you're calm, and everything is okay.
Oh, that was so beautiful. Thank you.